Well, howdy there, stranger. I'm Jordy,
And I'm Brad.
and welcome back to Beers with Queers, the true crime podcast where I research a case, and Brad here, and potentially you guys.
Don't know a damn thing about it.
All right, you guys, we are in the home stretch. It is a week and a half, 11 days to be exact, till Dragon Con. We haven't shut up about it for the last 3 months. This past weekend, we had our Con Crunch weekend where we got all the people that we're doing cosplays with and going with to Dragon Con this year, and everybody just hammered out their last minute cosplays they had to do. So it was like a little sweatshop.
Like a good-natured sweatshop, though. No one was there against their will.
No, like a ethical cosplay sweatshop.
And when he says they knocked out their cosplays, they knocked them out for this weekend. That doesn't mean we're done. We've got one more Con Crunch weekend to go. So just like always, 2 days ago, I decided to add another costume to my lineup last minute, and it requires sewing, which is my weakest skill.
It is very much Drag Race where it's like last day before elimination, I'm going to scrap my whole idea and I'm going to attempt to sew a full costume.
I will say it's turning out great. I'm keeping it a surprise until Dragon Con, but I will send pictures of it. And it's turned out so much better than I thought it was going to be, and it's so stupid.
It is, but it does look really good. It's stupid and it looks really good. So I'm excited for you guys to see it, and you'll get to in a week and 11 days.
And also, I wanted to give an update on my dad. He actually didn't get his heart valve. It was weird. They didn't do it because they were like, well, it wasn't on this request. So they did a balloon, and they opened up his aortic artery some, and he is doing well. He is off of oxygen, and so he's healing up now, and which means we're going to have another surgery, hopefully. But this shows that he will benefit from having a heart valve with him going off of oxygen for that. So very happy about that. Still taking care of him and everything. So right after this episode, I'm going to spend the night in my old bedroom, which I've been doing for a few weeks now, which is really weird.
It is really weird because, it's like a lifetime ago, like when I go visit back home and see my old bedroom, and it really is just like stepping into the past. But yes, very good that Brad's dad is on the up and up. Thank you guys so much for keeping him, continuing to show support and your concern, and it means a whole lot.
It does. It means a whole lot.
So with that, we're finally at the precipice where we can see the finish line, and I think everyone's making really good progress on their cosplays, and I'm very excited to take a full week off and just literally shut my brain off and just run around being goofy in downtown Atlanta with 100,000 of my closest friends.
And it is just a huge 24/7 party, and we're going from Tuesday to
Tuesday. And it's going to be, I'm here for it. I'm very excited. So hopefully we see you guys there. And if not, I can't wait to post the photos when we get back and show you guys just how crazy it is and maybe convince you to come, at least for a day or two. So with that, let's jump into today's case, because this is one I would say a lot of you may have already heard before. If you are deep in the trenches of true crime cases, it's more than likely you've at least come across this case, especially if you are in the subcategory of weird and mysterious disappearances. As you can tell by the title, this is going to be a missing person episode. So today, you're going to hear us cover it as we dive into the bizarre and eerie disappearance of 20-year-old Joshua Guimond. And also, I just want to ask, because it is pretty well known, have you heard this case before, Brad?
I'm terrible with names, so the name doesn't ring a bell right off. Maybe I'll know it once I hear the circumstances of it. So we'll see. We'll see if I know a damn thing about it.
Yeah, so let's just get into the case. And this may be one of those cases where you guys are like, I don't know, but then once you hear the details, you might know. So this is a case that happened all the way back in 2002, which is weird to say that 2002 is that far away, but it is
23 years ago.
23 years ago. And to this day, it continues to haunt Josh's loved ones and those familiar with the case as they try to wrap their heads around how he seemingly vanished into thin air on one cold November night while walking back home to his dorm room. Now, although his disappearance itself was a simple yet terrifying series of events, Josh left a party to turn in for the night and began the less than 5-minute walk back to his dorm, never to be seen again. But it's the details that came out afterwards that make people believe it's more than possible that Josh was met with foul play, and that potentially there is a killer still out there waiting to be brought to justice. So like we normally do on this podcast, let's start from the most critical point in this case, and that is the actual night that Josh vanished. So let's just jump right into it. It's a cold night on Saturday, November 9th, 2002, at the campus of St. John's University in Collegeville, Minnesota, and 20-year-old junior Joshua Guimond is busy finishing up a research paper he plans to use in a debate come Monday morning. Josh finishes his paper at around 11 p.m., and in order to celebrate and blow off some steam for a hard day's work, he decides to join two of his roommates, Greg and Alex, at a small party at their friend Nate's dorm close by. The trio leave their dorm at the St. Mar building on campus and make the 3-minute walk over to the Mettencourt dormitory building just south of their location. The walk is short, but is noted as the path to get between the two buildings. It will take you across a small bridge going over Stumpf Lake. Now, Josh did not have his wallet or keys with him, and later Greg and Alex would note that he seemed to be in a great mood the entire walk over and even during the party. The trio arrived at around 11:06 and joined their friend Nate and a few others in a poker game. For the next hour or so, the group hung out, drinking and letting off steam. Attendees at the party made note that it seemed Josh had anywhere between, quote, 7 and 12 beers while there, and opinions varied, with some saying he seemed to be a bit tipsy and others stating he seemed fine and not intoxicated at all. Which, some people are really good at hiding how intoxicated they are, so it could literally be either way. And some people are really good at holding their alcohol. Either way, things were going pretty chill until around 11:46 when his friends noted that seemingly out of nowhere, Josh got up from the table and left without saying a word or even goodbye to anyone. Now, at first they thought maybe he had just gone to the bathroom or something, but when he didn't return, they assumed he just went home to go to bed. Nate would later say he didn't think anything of it because, quote, we're in college. It's not like we're not going to see each other again. If you want to go home, you just go home. And fair, Irish goodbyes are very common, especially in college. When you're done, and you just leave. Because he's like, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow, probably. Now, about 15 minutes after Josh was last seen and leaving, Greg did call their dorm room phone to see if Josh made it back, but there was no answer. And he just assumed that Josh must have passed out, and the group continued on with their party like normal and didn't think anything of it. The next morning, another one of Josh's roommates and one of his best friends returned home from a different party off campus and was surprised to find Josh missing from his bed. He talked with Greg and Alex, who told him about Josh's abrupt departure the night before, and that they had even tried calling his mom to see if she knew where he had gone. When she didn't, they called other friends of Josh to see if they had any idea, but none of them did. The roommates were getting more and more concerned, but that concern soon turned to outright worry as Josh failed to show up to a mock debate as part of his pre-law society club that he was a part of and something he had been training for weeks.
Yeah, he wouldn't miss something like that.
And especially when you hear in a minute, he is a very dedicated and he takes his studies very seriously.
Most people in pre-law going into law school have to be.
Yeah, so this is not something you just miss because you're hungover or something, and he was a very responsible student. So following this, Nate first contacted campus security to report Josh missing before phoning his parents, Brian Guimond and Lisa Cheney, informing them as well. After campus security did a brief sweep of the campus that night, and friends were still unable to locate Josh, The local PD was called in to investigate the next morning, so now it's officially Monday morning. Even by this point, many of Josh's friends were concerned, of course, but they tried to rationalize his disappearance and tried to tell themselves that he was just holding up at a friend's house or maybe a secret girlfriend's house, and that they would all be laughing about this come the next morning. Because when something like this happens, your immediate first thought, most people, is not they're dead, they're murdered, because, it's that mentality of bad things happen to other people, not me and people I know. And so, of course, your brain's going to be like, it's going to be fine. Like, I'm worried, but like, we're going to sort this all out. It's a whole big misunderstanding. But little did they know, Josh wouldn't come home and would remain missing to this very day, leaving behind one of the most baffling missing person cases in American history. So before we go any further, let's tell you a little bit about Josh. Also, if you've listened to this podcast for a while, probably the thing that fascinates me the most in terms of research and true crime are cases like this where it's these missing persons cases where there's not really a definitive answer either way, and there's so many theories and each one has facts to back it up. So you can fall down so many rabbit holes. So Joshua Brian Guimond was born on June 18th, 1982 to Brian Guimond and Lisa Cheney in Redwood Falls, Minnesota. An only child, Josh's childhood could be described by many as being close to perfect as you could imagine. Both of his parents were very attentive and loving towards their son, and of course, only child, so of course he got all the attention he wanted. As a fellow only child.
Only child of 16.
Only child by my mother and father. My father has, 15 other kids, but that is neither here nor there. When he was 4, the family moved to Maple Lake, and not long after this, his parents would sadly get divorced, which of course is extremely hard on anyone, especially children. Also as a child of divorce, firsthand experience. But despite this, his parents continued to work together to raise him, and he was described as being incredibly bright and a happy kid. On top of this, he was said to be incredibly gifted academically, and he excelled in school. He would eventually graduate from Maple Lake High School as valedictorian and class president of the class of 2000. Raised in a religious household, Josh decided to attend St. John's University, an all-male Catholic school surrounded by 2,500 acres of woods and the Stumpf Lake. There, Josh majored in political science and often spoke of his dream to become a lawyer or a politician. His academic prose continued here as he was an honors student his entire time attending and was described by his classmates as being incredibly inspiring for his genuine dedication to education and his future life goals. Josh thrived through his college career and even had a girlfriend, whom he had actually been dating since high school, named Katie. The two stayed together throughout the first few years of college, before eventually breaking up just a few weeks before Josh's disappearance. Now, although, it's hard, especially when you've been together almost 4 years, although the breakup was mutual and the two remained very close friends and often even still hung out together, as Katie was attending the all-female Catholic school just a 15-minute drive down the road from St. John's. So, best case scenario, there was no bad blood, there was no drama, it was a mutual breakup, and they even continued to be friends, which is best case scenario. Josh was described by his friends as being incredibly bubbly, organized, and always with a smile on his face, and he showed no signs that anything was bothering him or wrong, which made his disappearance all the more shocking. Going back to the day after Josh was last seen, his friends had now informed authorities and his parents, who immediately began trying to find him and piece together a timeline of his final movements. Now, according to his friends, Josh left at approximately 11:46 without saying a word, although they assumed he went back to the dorm as he had given no indication that he had anywhere else to be, especially that late at night after studying and working all day. Now, this is the point of the story where we start getting into muddy waters here. One of the biggest controversies with this case came from the fact that authorities were never able to determine if Josh made it back to his dorm or not that night. No one that knew Josh personally reported seeing him or speaking with him past him leaving the party, and his car was still parked in the same spot it had been the previous day, meaning he didn't leave that way. Now, one helpful clue was the fact that in order to exit or leave the dorm, students had to swap a personal keycard that kept records for everyone coming and going. So each had their own room, and with so few roommates, it was actually pretty easy to keep track of who came and went. Checking the key system records, officers discovered that the last time Josh's card was swapped was at 11:06 p.m., which lines up with reports that this is the time he, Greg, and Alex left the dorm to go to the party. And his card recorded no further activity after this point, suggesting that maybe he didn't even make it back to the dorm that night. But to add to the confusion, in the days following and the news of his disappearance spreading across campus, two fellow students came forward with information stating that they actually saw Josh that night after he left the dorm party. Two unnamed students came to police and stated that they had actually passed Josh walking along the small bridge going over Stumpf Lake at approximately 12:30 a.m. They stated he was wearing a thick jacket and a scarf covering part of his mouth. Now, this seemed promising at first, as this is the same path one would take to get from Mettencourt back to the St. Mar building. But the fact that the students stated they saw Josh on the bridge at 12:30, despite his friends stating he left the Mettencourt dorm at 11:45, leaves almost an hour gap missing from the timeline, because remember, it's only a 3-minute walk between the two. So, what was he doing during that time if that was him on the bridge? Many people also question if it actually was Josh the two saw that night, as one, the man had his face partially covered, two, it was literally the middle of the night, and three, the interaction lasted less than a couple of seconds. And also four, these are people who didn't actually know Josh. They came forward and they were like, the guy we saw kind of looked like the picture of Josh. So a lot of people are like, is that, a credible sighting? Maybe, maybe not. But despite these inconsistencies, authorities do believe this to be the last credible sighting of Josh Guimond. So for this first clue, for several years, that was the end of that. As far as determining if Josh had actually made it back to his dorm before he disappeared, the consensus was, for the most part, his key card wasn't swapped, so more than likely he didn't make it back.
That's what I was going to say. The key card would be obvious. You can track that. That's something you would know, yes or no. And it's not like an eyewitness statement that could be wrong.
Right, and so most people are like, we can't 100% confirm, of course, a number of things could happen, but it seems likely something happened during that 3-minute walk between the two buildings. Until, in 2005, investigators actually released additional information that created far more questions than answers. They stated that despite Josh's key card not being swapped to get into the dorm after 11:06, data recovered from the computer in his room revealed that starting at 11:56, someone began playing music on his computer, and we know that this wasn't an automatic thing or the computer just playing itself, as multiple songs have been skipped, replayed, and played out of order for the next 40 minutes, with the music stopping at approximately 12:30 a.m. So this really confused people, especially investigators, as they weren't able to figure out how Josh would have been able to get back into the building if he didn't scan his key card.
I mean, he could have forgotten his key card because he didn't have his wallet.
Mm-hmm.
And I normally keep my key card for work in my wallet. So he could have just been, hey, can somebody let me in? And, when I forget my key card, which happens from time to time, that's how I do it. I just wait for somebody to come up to the door and say, hey, forgot my key card. Can you let me in too?
And that's the thing, a lot of people's like, that doesn't actually rule out that he wasn't back at the building, because he could have used someone else's key card. He could have went in with someone else. He could have gotten there as someone was leaving, and before the door shut, he caught it and was like, thank you, and got in that way. So this kind of does throw a wrench into the theory. Like, definitively, did he or did he not make it back to the room?
Especially if he didn't have his wallet on it, because most times I wouldn't just throw my key card in my pocket.
Right, and also, you have to think, if you're leaving with two other roommates, my mentality would be like, one of them's probably got their key card, or I even check. I'm like, do one of you have the card? And I just leave my stuff because it's one less thing for me to worry about. And I'm like, if I came with them, whatever, he may have gotten a key from them. We don't know. And so it's one of those things where it's like,
Well, I mean, they would probably say if they had given him a key, but I could see him just there's going to be students coming and going.
yeah.
So it would be very easy to get in there. And a small school, I figured this is a small school. Most people know each other, at least know of each other.
Right, and like he said, none of his roommates stated that they let him in or they gave him his key card. So unless one of them is lying or possibly confused by the dates, it's a mystery law enforcement haven't been able to figure out yet. Another possible theory is that someone other than Josh was using his computer to listen to music, which wouldn't be weird, as several of his roommates and friends stated that all of them kept their doors unlocked and the doors open most of the time when they weren't home, as most of them were really close friends. So that is also another theory. However, no one came forward to state that they had used his computer. And so, again, possibility, nothing can be 100% confirmed. So it could be a completely harmless case of someone using the computer and not seeing it as a big deal or forgetting about it or not wanting to get involved with the case. Or even another theory I've seen people throw around online was that it's possible the keycard system wasn't synced up properly, as daylight savings time had just ended in October of 2002. Many wondered if the system had to be calibrated manually to account for the time change, which is actually fair. 2002, and there's no telling like how that system worked. And as far as I'm aware, law enforcement haven't actually looked deep into this, and I'm not at this point sure if they could even confirm or deny that. But it's just one of those things to think about, like it is a theory. Either way, the search for Josh was pretty swift, and within just the day of him being reported missing, law enforcement spread out across St. John campus in search of him. One of the biggest theories initially, and one that is still very prominent, is that it's possible Josh fell into the Stumpf Lake and he drowned. Now, while some at the party said he didn't seem drunk, others said that he was. So a drunk college student falling into a body of water and tragically drowning is unfortunately not a new phenomenon. It happens countless times a year, and listen, I'm not even going to get into the smiley face killer theory. I personally don't believe in it, but not judging if you do. That was thrown around as Josh being a possible victim of them. It's a little too far-fetched for me. And for those of you who don't know, a brief synopsis is this theory that there is a network of serial killers going around drowning drunk college men walking home alone. So if you believe that or not judging. Now, the lake itself is also pretty huge, although I did read that the water under the bridge that night was less than 3 feet deep, which people can drown in a lot less, but at the same time, people are like, you would feel like you'd hear him or his body would still be floating, something would happen.
Or he could stand up.
Or he could stand up. But if he was drunk, maybe he couldn't. It was dark. It was also cold. It's November. So the shock might have got him. So it is, again, a possibility. So the likelihood of also finding a body if he did fall in and got swept out or something is kind of slim to none. But working off of this theory, officers brought in search divers and boats to begin scouring the lake for any sign of him. They used sonar and underwater video equipment on top of this. But despite multiple searches over several days, no sign of Josh was ever found. And this, of course, led to people forming other theories, including Josh's own father, Brian, to believe it's also highly possible that Josh isn't in the lake because his disappearance wasn't an accident, and that Josh was the victim of foul play, and that somewhere out there is someone responsible for his murder. Now, of course, we have seen this time and time again. Grieving families want someone to blame for their pain, and a lot of times their immediate reaction is to jump to foul play because, you can't make sense of it was just a tragic freak accident. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's easier to wrap your head around this was an intentional act caused by an evil person. But Josh's family and friends pointed to several pieces of circumstantial evidence that the foul play theory is not out of the realm of possibility. So to start off, let's talk about probably one of the biggest stories the University of St. John is known for, and that is the St. John Monk Abbey sexual abuse scandal, which I'm sure you can guess what that's about by the name, but in summary, in October of 2002, just a few weeks before Josh disappeared, news broke that St. John University had settled 18 different lawsuits in regards to allegations that several monks living in the Abbey on campus had sexually abused and assaulted young boys and men at the college, dating all the way back to the 1980s. It also came out that for the longest time, officials at the university had helped cover up the abuse until evidence became too overwhelming. Now, of course, when this came out in October, it had people outraged, and according to several people, none more so than Josh. According to his friends and family, Josh had been very vocal about his anger towards the abuse and how nothing more was being done about it. And according to multiple reports, several of the monks had been abusing the college-age boys at the school, and Josh's family believed that he could very well have fallen victim to one of them who abducted him and killed him to ensure his silence. And even that in and of itself is a very serious allegation. But it does get a bit more damning when years later, it would eventually come out that even after the scandal broke in 2002, it didn't stop the abuse. Reports came out in 2012 and 2015 of monks still living at the Abbey on campus, abusing upwards of 200 students and young boys from the neighboring towns. That's a pretty big
That's a lot.
scandal. Yes, that's disgustingly disturbing.
And that's after it became public knowledge. So they're like, whatever, we're going to keep doing it.
Yeah, not even attempting to hide it. So it's not like it stopped after the scandal broke. This was still very much going on, if not ramping up. So it's not like the abuse stopped. It was very active going on at the time of Josh's disappearance. So him potentially being a victim is not out of the realm of possibility. His family also said that his deep faith in religion was a possible way he may have even been lured away. Now, even more strange evidence was Josh mentioned in the days before his disappearance that he was enraged to discover that several of the monks listed in the lawsuit were actually living in his own dorm building. Again, side eye. And also, not to be sued. These are allegations because none of this is proven, but it's a theory. Now, to go along with this, in the days following his disappearance, bloodhounds were brought in to track his scent. One set of dogs actually tracked his scent all the way up until the bridge overlooking Stumpf Lake, leading many to state this is proof he fell in. But another set of bloodhounds brought in traced his scent to a different location. They traced it directly to the St. John Abbey, where the monks live. So again, this is one of those cases that's going to be kind of infuriating, where it's no matter what path you choose, there's equal evidence for each one. So it's like, do you believe this was just a tragic accident and he drowned? Here's this. Do you believe he was the victim of foul play from predators living on campus, knowingly living on campus? Here's your evidence for that. So this lead also ended up leading nowhere, and again, kind of just created more questions than answers. Over the first week after he went missing, police searched directions around the university within a 20-mile radius, and they found nothing. Nothing was found to indicate foul play, yet nothing was found to indicate that he was in the lake either. So everyone was at a stalemate on what happened to Josh. Although police were still stuck at this point on the theory that he drowned, his father Brian was adamant something sinister had happened to him, and he was determined to prove it. He took off time from work and spent nearly 6 months kayaking the lake and nearby rivers himself every day, looking for any sign of his son, and openly speaking out about his belief it was possible the monks at the Abbey may have had something to do with it and they needed to be investigated further, which was met by a restraining order from the university. So, now, after a while, a new theory was presented that maybe it was neither. Maybe Josh went off intentionally, possibly to take his own life. This was also met with extreme pushback from his friends and family, who all stated that there was absolutely no indication that Josh was depressed or suicidal in any way, which of course, I mean, that could or could mean anything. Some people are really good at hiding their pain, but like the other two theories, even less so, there was nothing to indicate that this was what happened. So even less than the other two theories presented, it's like there's no, he didn't say anything, he didn't search anything online. There's literally not a scringe of evidence that this is what happened. However, a few concerning pieces of information were uncovered in those following weeks that did nothing to quell the fears that Josh was met with foul play. Josh's parents and friends soon learned that this wasn't the only incident that had happened at St. John's University in recent years. Over the last year, before Josh had went missing, several other reports were made by fellow students of strange encounters with an unknown man seen prowling around the campus. In one incident, 2 students studying late in the library reported to campus security that they were approached by an unknown man who attempted to lure them into the nearby woods on the promise that he would pay them if they tied him to a tree and left him there.
That's interesting.
That's very interesting.
Tie him to the tree. Tie the man that was going to pay them
Yep.
to the tree.
Tie him to the tree. When they refused, the man ran out of the building and was not seen again. And that one I can kind of like, there are weird people. Maybe it was just a weird guy. But in 2001, an even sinister incident occurred when an unknown male student reported that as he walked home at night, he was attacked from behind by an unknown assailant who proceeded to drag him into the woods and began to drown him in the lake before running away when people approached. This man was also never caught. So just the year before, and that is pretty concerning. And to add to this, Josh's father publicly called out 3 other disappearances that had occurred under strange circumstances in a 100-mile radius in the previous 10 days before Josh vanished. 2 men and a woman. Although the woman was found to have been murdered by an unrelated man, both men were found in nearby bodies of water deceased, and their deaths were ruled accidental. And now, I and a lot of law enforcement don't put a lot of weight into this, as it's one of those things I think it's confirmation bias. If you go looking for signs and patterns, your brain is going to find them no matter what. And I get it, like he's trying to just get them to listen to him and at least investigate the foul play theory seriously. At least take it seriously enough to look really into it. But sadly, following these developments, Josh's case quickly grew cold. For a while, his case haunted the university campus as students no longer went out at night and traveled in groups to avoid possible danger. But within a year, they also started to move on, and he started to fade from their memory, becoming a dark chapter in this school's already dark history. There were no updates in Josh's case for the next 6 years before investigators finally caught a break. They unlocked a huge clue that, again, only added more questions than answers. In 2008, investigators were able to finally recover the full contents of Josh's computer, including things that were deleted. Among the data recovered, they found searches and info on how to create fake IDs, and although there's no evidence that was something Josh was doing, it did raise eyebrows since he was Googling it and searching how to do it. So, was that nefarious? Was he trying to come up with one himself since he was just 20? It's one of those things that's just weird. And it also was weird coming from a student who was described as being very straight-laced like Josh. That doesn't seem like something he'd do. But on top of that, they also discovered that Josh had been Googling and watching gay pornography, something his friends and family stated they were completely unaware of. He never told any of them about possibly having an interest in men, but to be fair, being from a very religious family and attending a very religious college, it would make sense that this would be a very closely guarded secret. And also, it's one of those things, very much so, I do not doubt they would have kicked him out if they found out about that. But the dozen monks abusing students, they're like, just let it happen. But that still wasn't the most concerning thing they found. Investigators also discovered that Josh had been using Yahoo chat rooms, and that over the last several months before he went missing, Josh had been talking with dozens of men online under the guise of being a woman. He had a profile created of a female blonde woman whom he named Gwen to talk sexually with various men. I read reports that said over 50 at least. When interviewing his friends, none of them recognized the woman in the photos, nor did they know anyone named Gwen. So where that came from is kind of a mystery. Could very well likely have just pulled it randomly offline, who knows. This led investigators to having a new theory, and one to this day they now consider the most prominent. So out the door with they don't think he drowned, they don't think he's in the lake. The new running theory as of today is that it seems more than likely Josh was at the very least exploring his sexuality and possibly chatting with men to potentially meet up for a sexual encounter, leading to the possibility that maybe Josh didn't tell anyone where he was going that night because he was going to meet up with another man, and maybe that man did something to him. They did a complete shift in focus and started really looking into a man with a car abducting Josh and murdering him. Now, this actually led to new tips pouring in, including several previous reports from the college campus security, where in the weeks leading up to Josh's disappearance, there were multiple reports of a strange man driving around the campus in an orange Pontiac who was seen picking up and dropping off various men, usually in the middle of the night, Now, this driver was apparently later identified by police, but refused to cooperate and stated that his orange Pontiac was destroyed not long after it was seen on campus. So, as of now, that lead kind of also went nowhere. None of the men in the photos found on Josh's computer were able to be identified, and following another analysis of the computer contents in 2021, the photos of 28 more men were found, which this time were released by investigators who asked for the public's help in identifying any of them. Brian Guimond has continued to fight for justice for his son and for the search to not die. He sued the local PD in an attempt to get access to Josh's file and stated the investigation was botched from the start, as none of Josh's friends or classmates were interviewed fully for almost 2 weeks after he went missing.
Yeah, that seemed like a failure right there.
And that's where you line up, like, their stories probably did change because, drunk college kids, they're not going to remember something 2 weeks ago that at the time seemed like a minor detail. Like, did one of them hand Josh their key card at some point at that night? I wouldn't remember that. I'm like, maybe, maybe not. I can't tell you 100%. And to this, investigators continue to look into Josh's case every now and then, with the latest one being a deep search of Stumpf Lake in 2023, which again turned up nothing. Josh's case has continued to fascinate and perplex those interested in true crime and mysteries, as not one single theory makes full sense, and there's still so many questions left unanswered. I think most recently it was actually an episode of the new Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix. Now, again, it didn't really do much to answer anything because there's still so many avenues this could have went. Was it a tragic accident? Was it a conspiracy? Was it suicide? Did he meet someone who ended up causing him harm? We don't know any which way. There's enough evidence there, which not a lot, to support any of those theories. Now, despite 23 years passing, those who love Josh have refused to give up hope, and they continue searching for answers that will hopefully come one day. And as of right now, that is the case of the tragic and bizarre disappearance of Joshua Guimond. And again, like I said, it's one of those ones that fascinates me because where did he go? And I always think that with every missing person case, they have to be somewhere. No one just vanishes. They are somewhere physically. And it kills me that, their loved ones and law enforcement can't find them.
Especially since he was just 3 minutes away from his dorm.
And that too, it was such a small period of time. 3 minutes is not a lot, and it's such a short walk. So to vanish in between that is, baffling. It's something you see in a movie.
Plus, you're on a Catholic school campus. You would think you would be pretty safe there.
Yeah, a small Catholic school. And also, the stereotype is you think young men aren't normally the ones targeted to be abducted walking home at night, maybe robbery or something. But sometimes it does happen. It may be rare, but it does happen. So even if you are a man walking home at night from anywhere, be careful. Watch yourself.
Always be careful. Always watch yourself, no matter who you are.
Yeah. But I think there's a lot of times, like I said, especially men have this sense of security where they're no one's going to come after a man at night for a sexually motivated attack or something, and you would be surprised. But yeah, this is one of those cases hopefully one day, it's been 23 years, but cases have been solved much older than that. And so I definitely hold out hope that this is one of those cases that can be solved. And I don't lean one way or the other. I don't want to say definitively, I believe it was an accident or I believe he was killed. But I do believe there could be a better investigation into various different avenues. There's also, maybe he did take his own life because he was struggling with feelings of homosexuality. That could be a possibility. Hopefully one day, because to this day, they're still analyzing his computer 23 years later. And as technology grows and gets better, they may be able to uncover more stuff. And yeah, hopefully one day we'll be able to do an update for you guys and finally put an end to this case and give his loved ones closure. And with that, thank you guys so much for tuning in for another episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star rating or review on iTunes or Spotify. Helps us out a lot, helps other people discover the podcast. And of course, we just love hearing from you guys. If you want to see photos from today's case, you can follow us on Instagram at Beers with Queers Pod, that's POD, or on Facebook at Beers with Queers, a true crime podcast. And until Monday, stay dangerous out there and watch your back.
See you soon.